Good evening, Merca. You are watching Roads to Liberty with another fun-filled, awesome adventure of an episode. Today we have a super cool guest. We have Neema Vedadi, ex-co-host of the Freedom Feens, current peaceful parent, current DJ, current anarchist. And we will be interviewing him, picking his brain, and I'm sure learning much from him. And I want to thank everyone for bearing with us. We did take a week off last week on the program because of my travels. I picked up and moved across country. I went from the eastern zone to the mountain zone. I have moved to a place where it's 20 miles to go absolutely anywhere. And the good news is, in the meantime, when you're going to those places, if it's daytime, you have nothing but the most beautiful mountain and prairie and gorges and valleys and just everything to look at. So I won't tell you exactly where I am, but you can find me in the state of New Mexico somewhere. And without any further ado, let's get to our guest, Neema Vedadi, ex-co-host of the Freedom Feens. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parker. It is an honor. So you decided to break bad and go over to New Mexico, huh?
Yeah, bro. I saw that outlaw life, and it called my name.
Did it?
So,
Did it?
yeah.
Excellent. Is it a specific reason you went there? Were you trying to escape something, or were you trying to go towards something?
Good question. I would say escape, because I lived in New Jersey most of my life, and then I moved to Florida back in January, and I spent about 6 months down there. And what I noticed is there's certain places in at least America. I've never left the country, unfortunately, yet, but there's certain places, at least in America, where you can't be really alone with your thoughts too much. There's so much commotion. There's so much hustle and bustle and traffic and sirens and everything, and I wanted to escape all that. So I came out here to where it was pretty much just nature and a couple town folk. And I do an online business, as most people know. I do websites and social media and marketing advice for businesses. And yeah, it's a lot easier to eke out a living when you're just alone with the dust balls and the prairie wolves.
And less government, too. I imagine there's less tax burden on you out there, right?
Absolutely, yeah. There is no state income tax, I believe. I did my research about 2 months ago, and it was like a yes, and I said okay. But I don't really worry about that kind of stuff too much because, you know, my business isn't very, very successful yet, and if it ever were, I'd be hiring someone to take care of all that for me. But I don't think the government. I mean, I do pay my taxes due to my
gun to your head.
Yeah, I just don't like guns pointed at me. It's just a personal thing, I guess, but. So yeah, let me get my show notes out. Did you have anything else you want to start out and say before we jump into it?
No, take the reins, good sir. I trust your judgment.
Wonderful, cool. All right, well, I want to talk about your fathering experience. You have a baby now, little Lily Vedadi, aka the Bean. What's her age? How long has she been on the planet for?
Lily, more than 7 months now. So 7 months and 11 days-ish. And she goes by Lily June Vedadi is the full name. My wife wanted to name her Lillian. I said, no, we'll name her Lily for short, and then we'll call her Lillian for long.
Nice.
She hated the idea. And anytime I call her Lillian now, I get that, you know, that wife eye.
Right.
You'll probably come to know that soon enough. But yeah, she's a complete joy. We call her Bean. I don't know how we got to that, but I always give everybody I'm close with nicknames, and they just sort of evolve, kind of like language. And right now we're on Bean. It'll be something else eventually in the next few months, I'm sure. And they say having a baby changes your life, and it sounds like a cliche. It's one of those things that doesn't smack you in the face until it actually happens. And it's a complete pleasure, and I'm totally happy. And before it happened, you know, you're on board with at least as a peaceful parenting kind of something I'm passionate about. I was always thinking of how I'm going to do it, you know, intellectually. You know, like I need to be there for the first, you know, completely for those first few years, all the important development that happens. You know, so much of the brain development happens from age 0 to 5. I want to be there. I want the kid to know me. And when you're actually experiencing it, all that sort of jargon and medical speak and all those words just kind of fly away, and it's just about love. I'm there for her because it's what I want more than anything. It's more primal, I think, than intellectual once it actually happens.
Yeah, I'm not a father, but I think just intuitively speaking, like you said, taking it away from the intellectual realm as much as possible because I've never done it, but I would imagine there's a sort of a magical nature type of moment that occurs when you get that baby in your hands. You go, this is part of me, man. Like this thing came from me
Right.
somehow, and like they're gonna grow up, and I'm gonna talk to them hopefully, and like sit on the porch and have a nice tea with them and bullshit. And
Right.
I don't, I kind of get amazed that there are actually a whole industry of parenting experts and parenting books. Like it's actually that hard to teach people to love the thing that came from them. Like
Right.
it's sort of crazy.
Well, are we allowed to cuss on your show?
Cuss on, brother man. Fuck it.
There's controversy around Molyneux, but one of the things I think he said that kind of stuck with me is you can boil down a lot of mainstream culture and society with one phrase, and that's fuck kids. And I feel like that's the reason why you have all of these different books and all the different experts is because if you think of the way mainstream society works, we throw our kids in these basically prisons. We beat all of the nature out of them. And so I think that kids have a natural reaction against that. And so then there's this other solution to that problem that the state has created. And, well, how do I get my kid to be happy with sitting in a school for 8 hours a day? How do I get my kid to be happy with having to do homework all the time? How do I get my kid to not be bouncing off the wall in this world where there's all this amazing stuff, but I don't want my kid to experience the amazing stuff? And that's obviously not all parenting advice is like that, but I think that the industrialized kind of parental advice can tend towards that direction of how do I get my kid in line and how do I make my kid be the kid I want my kid to be, rather than I'm a steward for my kid's life. I'm not the owner of my kid. I'm the protector of my kid.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wish that that was more intuitive for more parents, even though I'm not part of the parenting community, just as someone that will grow up in the world and live in this world and have young people grow up next to me and have them be cops one day or be voluntarist safety service providers, hopefully. But, yeah, I think Molyneux is definitely on something, and I will stand up in his corner and say, maybe you don't have to like everybody on everything, but if you can take what he's doing and say, look, if you're hitting your kids or if you were hit as a kid and you're playing that off like that's not a big deal, I think you're missing the point. Like violence is bad. We're not just saying violence from the state is bad. Violence, period, is bad, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's so great that you get the actual order of operations for that, because I feel like people who are not yet libertarians or anarchists, they don't get that. They're like, well, why do you think the government is the evil for everything? Everything you say that the problem is the government, and why are you so anti-government? And I say, well, at least me, I'm not anti-state or anti-government necessarily. I'm anti-aggression. The state just happens to be the most aggressive force in human history.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whatever that saying is, if being sexy were a crime, then lock me up. You know what I mean? Well, if being violent were a crime, then lock up the state, because
Yeah.
they're the biggest criminals when it comes to just initiating violence on innocent people. They're allowed to do it. I mean, sort of. It's socially accepted that they can steal or take people hostage or whatever. It's social convention. Oh, you got arrested. Ha ha. What was that like? Not, oh my God, someone dragged you off from your free path and took you and put you in a cage for doing no harm to someone because you had a plant or because you parked in the wrong zone or whatever. That sounds a little bit like things escalated kind of quickly there. Like if you're over my house and even and you spilled a cup of coffee on the floor and I locked you in a cage for 6 months, like that'd be pretty insane. And it feels like that's what happens to the state. Like you get a parking ticket and metastasized into a bench warrant, and then before you know it, you owe $1,000, and then you have to get a lawyer. Before you know it, you're facing all this stuff, and it's like I just parked in the wrong spot for 20 minutes, you know.
Hmm.
But I wanted to circle back on the parenting stuff a little bit more.
Okay.
Do you have any? I know, and I agree with you fully. Just what you said about not trying to say, "Here's what my kid's going to be like," as opposed to saying, I can't wait to find out what my kid's going to be like so I can
Right.
mirror and match them as a parent and help them facilitate their growth and their exploration
Yes.
as a person. But getting that we're on the same page with that kind of, at least, do you have any kind of wants or wishes for her that you are trying to fight out selfishly? Like, oh, I'd love her to make music, or I'd love her to be an anarchist, or I'd love her to not want to go to public school. That's a great one. Like, do you care if she goes to public school, or is it something you're gonna give her an option
Oh
to?
yeah,
Or
yeah. Well, the public school thing in specific, I mean, that is completely the parent's responsibility. I don't think any kid would choose to go to public school. Maybe when she's older, she'll say, "Daddy, I want to try that." And if it's really something she wants to do, I mean, I also think it's my duty to educate her on why I don't want her to go there and why I think it would be a bad idea. But if she still wanted to, I guess, yeah, I might take her there for a day. I bet it would last a day or maybe a week before she said, "Oh, I get it, Dad. It sucks." Yes,
Yeah.
honey, it sucks. But I think there's obviously every parent wants their kids to do the things they like, and there's certain things that the parents want to push their kids towards. And I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily to show her the stuff that I like. And I think that that's sort of a natural progression of parenting anyway. I don't think that's something we should necessarily fight. I carry her around on me often throughout the day, and if I'm working from home, she sees what I'm doing. She is always grabbing my mixer and turning the knobs because my 8-channel mixer is right next to the computer. She grabs it and she turns the knobs. If I'm making music, she pounds on the synthesizer, and so I'll say, "Okay, well, let's play it for a little bit." And I turn the arpeggiator on and I let her just smash the keys, and it puts them in a sequence so it sounds like she's making music, and she just loves it. She has a ball, and then she wants to twist the knobs. And I think children, they learn so much by emulating. You know, there's that saying, children are a sponge, and it's totally true. And so I just want to make sure that I'm putting out good examples to her and not doing things like maybe losing my temper or saying bigoted things or being lazy and just sitting around all day. So in the end, I don't think I want to push her towards anything, but I want to be as good an example as I can. And I think by default, she'll end up liking a lot of the same things I like. And if not, maybe she thinks I'm a really bad example, and that's fine too, as long as she's learning from the experience.
Yeah, I highly doubt she's going to end up with the conclusion that you're a bad example or anything like that. I mean, you've done a lot in your life. You went out early on and said, "I want to be a media professional. I want to, work for networks." You tried that out. You didn't let your personal or moral views be squashed by your career, which takes a lot of courage. And we all who make that choice, I include myself in that, because I have standards as well for what I will do for work and what I won't do. But doing all that and then transitioning to being a father, I mean, I think anyone would be happy to grow up as your kid. I mean, I don't know that, but I feel that way. No problem, man. And then the other stuff towards what you said about homeschooling and not, I tend to agree. Like Molyneux actually says as well, like, it's about creating the right environment at first, where there's no violence in the home, there's no yelling, there's no statism and flag worship and things like that. And then you can kind of assume with logic and reason that your child will gravitate towards peaceful things as opposed to violent things, because I mean, even if you grew up in a hostile environment, I think a lot of people, when they see peace, go, "Oh, that looks nice. Like, I wish I had that my whole life. That looks like a good thing,"
Right. I think the metaphor he's fond of using, and it's a good one, is, if you dropped my kid in the middle of China, would you expect her to speak Mandarin? You wouldn't,
Yeah.
because we don't speak that at home. And so if you don't teach your kid the language of violence, she's not really going to understand how a public school works. Because in public school, it's all about do what the teacher says, do what the authority figure says, or there's this consequence and that leads to that consequence. There's detention, there's in-school suspension. There's even paddling still in several states. I was paddled when I was in intermediate school.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, actually, they gave us the choice, so I guess I was on the tail end of it. I think it still exists here in Texas, but they would say, well, you can go get 3 SWATs, and we won't tell your parents, or we can send a note home to your parents, and you can have detention. And I was like, well, I don't want to get punished twice. Give me the SWATs. It's short-term pain. I had that kind of a good time preference.
That's terrible. I mean, children, at least in the status view, can't enter into contract, and here you have a state authority basically trying to get a child into a verbal contract to barter physical violence for, like, responsibility, equity, whatever that is. Like, I won't tell your parents if you let me mutilate you with my hands. Like, okay.
Right.
It's a little scary. That's like a nightmare type of situation.
It's kind of sick. Although in Futurama on tax day, there's the joke that you can either pay your taxes or you can pay a visit to the pain monster. And
I'll take the pain monster.
I'll take the pain monster.
least it's over quick, and you can get
Right,
back to
right,
building your equity in your business and stuff,
right,
or
right.
whatever it is.
Although, I
Um,
mean, even physical pain though can leave lasting scars mentally. So,
yeah,
I could imagine if it was scarring enough to me, it might have. Maybe it did in reality, and I just haven't worked through it enough in therapy or something. But that kind of physical violence, I think, can scar and probably does scar some kids permanently, or at least later on down the life, they might have some symptoms from being hit as kids, even in school. Not just being beat every day by their parents, but even just being
sure.
hit as an official thing from school. But if you think about it, that's kind of how the state works, right? There's either pain compliance or there's paper compliance. One way or the other, you're going to submit. And
I would.
it's
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I would even argue that maybe it's the same thing because, at least for the person who's aware, because I noticed like when I'm at work, when I used to work at a job, when I had like a paycheck type job, I would be aware of the fact that like okay, Monday and Tuesday I work for the state, and then the rest of the days I work for myself or whatever. January through March I work for the state, and then the rest of the year I work for myself. Like that is physical torture because I would have those months off if it weren't for the state. Like I would just take a vacation for
Right.
3 months or make more money. You know.
Right. Well, think
So.
about how much better your life would be if you got to decide how to spend all of that extra time. I mean, think of the opportunity costs we've missed out. It's not just money. People try to make the argument, well, it's not that much of your money, which I would disagree with that in the first place. But even if you granted that for the sake of argument, that the government doesn't take that much money, that's still also time that you're working for the state that you could be using to retrain yourself or invest in a new business, or even just give yourself the rest you need to have the mental fitness to do better in your main career. I think you could get ahead so much easier if you didn't have to spend all that time working for Uncle Sam or whatever state house or whatever local government you're working for that day.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the extortion racket is a lot bigger than the on paper statistics would have you believe. They'll have you believe you're paying 27% tax or something, but then you forget you have to add in your sales tax, your gas tax, how much more do your goods cost because they have to get over land and they have to all pay gas tax, road tax. The businesses that sell you items and goods and services are all taxed. So what is the real value of an asset or of a good or a service minus the extortion that or the middlemen that have to the mouths have to get fed along the way. I would argue that it's probably something extraordinary, like 80 to 90% of our value is being extracted. Would be my amateur guess, but
Right. And people have made estimates here and there, up to that level before, and that's my feeling too. But the real answer is we have no idea. We don't get to try. We don't get to let the market work those decisions out. I mean, I think if we did, the market incentivizes higher quality and lower price constantly. And you can see examples of this in everyday life everywhere. Look at Walmart. Look at cars. Look at cell phones. Look at everything in life. It gets better every year. People are always trying to get the new stuff, and even the relatively poor in American society, at least, they still have the latest tech. They still have the latest cool gadgets and toys, and they get to play with it. So, and those are market forces that are giving that to people.
absolutely. I was saying on Robert Kruger's podcast or video, the Anarchast the other day, how if the state could have came out with like iPads or Facebook or something like 10 years before the market, just to like track us or get something in our hands that they can only provide and them alone, they would have leapt at that, especially if it was taxpayer funded and they could kind of expense it out on our next generation of young. But they couldn't figure that out because it wasn't something 20 men in a room could do. It was something that millions of people needed to do organically through natural market forces, and people don't really get that the invisible hand of the market isn't this textbook genie that floats around from a magic lamp. It's
Uh-huh.
it's just like saying like inertia. It's just a law of nature. It's just like
Right.
economics, biology. It's just another form of science. But we have a question in the chat from Lusander Feen, which I'm happy to see. He's in the chat. He's one of the new, right? If I'm not mistaken, I don't want to misspeak. I believe he's one of the new co-hosts.
He is, yes. Lou
Okay.
has definitely stepped up. I'm a big fan of Lou. He was always one of our favorite fiends, and it's definitely good to hear him as a constant voice there now.
Okay, so Lusander wants to know what are things about parenting that you thought you knew that turned out to be the opposite or different?
That I thought I knew. Okay. I honestly thought that I would still get a good night's sleep most of the time. I thought,
Wrong.
we'll sort this out eventually. It'll be fine. And you don't know, and it changes on a day-to-day basis. You never really know if the baby's going to sleep throughout the whole night and not cry all the time, or if she is. So that's one thing. Um, what else? I guess I didn't know how quickly she would take up solid food and love it. My little girl Lily is obsessed with food. We do something called baby-led weaning, where instead of feeding her baby food with a spoon, us doing it and her just sitting passively with her mouth open like Clockwork Orange or something, held open. Instead, we put items on a plate that we would eat, that adults can eat, like avocado, banana, that are also soft, that she's not going to
Sure.
choke on. And we let her play in it and eat it. And eventually, the first week she just sort of played around, but now she's obsessed with peaches and watermelon. And so she'll take a
Oh, that's
peach
beautiful.
and she'll suck on the peach all day. She'll eat a whole peach. She'll eat a whole prune.
At
Um,
7 months old.
at 7 months old, yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Unfortunately, she's really starting to favor fruits. At first, we were trying to push her towards the avocado and broccoli. She really liked broccoli. We set her down. We were eating at Red Robin, and my wife ordered a side of broccoli, thinking that would be part of her meal. And instead, Lily just plunged into it. She dove into it, and she just, hand after hand after hand, she ate almost that whole bowl of broccoli.
Wow.
And so that's been a real pleasant surprise, I think, because since we're exclusively breastfeeding, I don't really get a chance to have that bonding of me feeding her. She doesn't take a bottle, but
Have you tried breastfeeding with her? Is it something you just are assuming you can't do, or
that I no, I can't.
biologically?
Is that a joke?
Yeah, it's a joke. I have a dry
I've,
sense of humor sometimes. I want to see if
no,
you're paying attention.
that's good. That's good. I've tried, but I think I'm a little too hairy. She does that number. She doesn't like the taste.
No, no, like no bueno. Okay.
Uh,
We gotta keep it light.
but
Go
no. In
ahead.
fact, I actually fed her a little early because I was holding a banana and she really wanted the banana. And so mom said no food till 6 months, and this was like 5 months. And I was like, well, she could try a little bite of the banana, and she did, and she loved it.
Right. I don't know biologically, like, or scientifically how the baby's stomach is in terms of acids and able to process X, Y, or Z, but I'm sure you guys have done a little bit of homework on that kind of stuff.
Right, right. Supposedly, the digestive tract does change, and you can note it by their, I guess you would put it politely, by their stool. And so we did notice that change in her digestive tract before we started feeding her the solid food.
Little green items come out, green means go.
We'll leave it to the audience's imagination.
Very nice. All right, so I want to quick get into some show kind of maintenance type stuff. Our regular viewers know that Roads to Liberty is a documentation of our collective journey from statism towards, I guess you could say, liberty or voluntarism. But we want to highlight how that's different for everybody. And real quick, I'll tell mine again. It's very apt that I'm telling it now. And I'll have Neema tell his. My road to liberty started with Ron Paul in 2000 and I guess 11, to where I voted for Obama. I admit this before, and I'll admit it again. It's the truth. I voted for him in 2008, and I bought into the hype. I drank the Kool-Aid. It was a good flavor at the time. It had a really bad aftertaste. It didn't go down smooth. I got all sorts of digestion problems, and I'm still not the same after it. But come 2012 round of elections, I said, you know what? Let me just check out the Republican lot. I doubt I'll see anybody interesting in there, but this Obama guy isn't really working out the way I thought he would. So let me just try the other party, right? Here comes the pale horse. Here comes Ron Paul. The man is obviously captivating everyone's attention. He's putting everyone in their place and basically saying, shut the fuck up, you're all retarded. Here's the right answer. Every single topic that was ever thrown at him in a debate. And I think a lot of us statist types kind of were like, man, we can buy into this Constitution stuff and just get back to the America's glory days kind of stuff. And that was what I needed to get started. And then just by Neema wants to we have more comments I'll get back to. We just so I was searching on my podcast app, I think it was Stitcher, and I was trying to find Ron Paul material, and didn't have a podcast or anything at the time. So I found a Freedom Feens episode, and that was it, man. I mean, I listened to in the archive probably 3 or 4 episodes straight. It was like a 4-hour trip I was on driving to DC from New Jersey, and I got there, and I mean, I became a podcast enthusiast prior to that, but I went from listening to all internet marketing and stuff like that to listening to all libertarian and Freedom Feens, Bad Quaker, Adam Kokesh, Free Talk Live. I don't want to leave anybody out. Corbett Report, Ed and Ethan. I mean, a ton of people. I'm sure I'm leaving plenty out. I'm sure. But any which way, that was my road to liberty, and it was thanks to the Freedom Feens having such a light and casual and humorous approach to macho libertarian flash and heroin and crocodile and vending machines. It really woke my ass up, and I thank you guys for that.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome, man. So is the question then how I got to liberty?
Yeah, yep.
Well, first I would like to just say that is so good for me to hear. I love hearing that because that was the concept, man, is that so much of the libertarian media, at least at the time when we started, sometimes it seemed very stuffy, it seemed very academic, and I kind of dug it. I liked that about it. I liked feeling like I'm smart and pseudo-intellectual and all this kind of stuff, but I thought there was a real gap in just your average Joe kind of talking about liberty. And you know, people even told us when we first started, you know, this is what it should be, because you don't have to necessarily read John Locke to get it. You just have to know that you own yourself. You just have to know that what I do with my property is nobody else's business. It's more primal, I think, than intellectual. And I think the propaganda out there of the state is what has changed that, to where people think that human nature is to be organized by some dictator or leader. I don't think that's natural to us. I think that's been beaten into us by public education and indoctrination. And so I think that with the Freedom Feens, me and Michael hit a really good note with let's just laugh at that ridiculousness, and we'll prove it wrong, and we'll have examples too, but let's have some fun with this. I think Michael put on the blog site, you know, we're laughing while Western civilization collapses, and it's not that we're laughing at some kind of collapse or some kind of horror. It's we're laughing that finally the inconsistencies of the statist arguments are being put on blast, and they're being ridiculed, and we're helping to laugh at the ridicule and also doing some ridicule of our own. My path was fairly similar to yours in that it really was Ron Paul who sort of brought me in that direction. You know, I was straggling off. I was doing things like I can't believe, I don't know if I've ever come out with this, but I went canvassing for John Kerry during the 2004 elections. Okay. I went out. It was a paid gig. I would go out and knock on doors, and well, my pitch was anybody but Bush, right? But I was collecting money for John Kerry. The money that if people donated money, I gave it back to John Kerry. Dude,
I think a lot of people, just to cut you off real quick, I think a lot of people in the movement, so to speak, collectivizing ourselves, would identify with that. Like, I don't think it's a wonder that people who are so concerned about their political or philosophically moral whatever views now in liberty came from being like pretty hardcore statists. Like, we believed at some point that America's great because we have democracy and we have rule of law and all that, and debunking that is the challenge. But I'm sorry, continue.
Well, exactly, and a lot of the people in the movement now, they started with that passion to that understanding that the world could be so much better than it is right now. The difference, the distinction is that in the past we may have thought, well, the way to do it is political action because that's what school taught us. So we went to our base level of training. Like they say in a self-defense situation, you go to your base level of training, what you're most proficient at. And so many of us were just proficient at that high school civics lesson of start a political action committee, vote, do all these kind of things, volunteer for your local government, and do things like that. And it's just nonsense. I started to realize that when the Democrats swept the 2006 midterm elections and did things like continue the wars, continue the monetary policy, make it worse, minimum wage. It screwed me over. I was still in college at the time, and I was delivering pizzas, and they actually sent a letter to us, the owner of the company I was working for, and he said, well, the minimum wage is raising, and so I have to do something. And we had meetings, and we didn't know what to do because it wasn't going to work for him, so we ended up imposing a delivery charge, which affected customers negatively, and it affected my tips negatively. So I actually made less money when they imposed the minimum wage. And that's when I started to think, maybe the government writing something down and enforcing it isn't really how you affect change in the world. Maybe there's unintended consequences. And I sort of got a hold of Ron Paul, I think through my mom, because he visited her schoolroom and she was talking about him. And so I learned about him. I saw the debate with him and Giuliani where he just totally schooled Giuliani about blowback and put him in his little place. And I was hooked. And so me and my wife went and did phone promoting for Ron Paul. I was an alternate delegate. And when the election was over, it was like, what do we do now? I started hanging around Campaign for Liberty forums, and people were posting all this stuff from Lou Rockwell's blog. And I was like, oh, there's more to it. And so I started reading Lou Rockwell. I started reading Butler Schaefer. I read Boundaries of Order. And that's when I kind of got that not only this isn't just a fantasy thing. Private property and liberty is actually the best way to organize the world. It's not only it doesn't only sound good, but it's also workable, and it's sort of progressed from there and snowballed, I guess you could say.
Awesome. Yeah, I love trying to get everyone's road to liberty story, and I think it always kind of goes down smoother when we have a little statist, like not chaser, but like a little lemon squeeze or something. It's like, you know what, we had that bitter pucker where we look back and that was me, man.
Yeah.
Like I remember stuff I said that like I'm ashamed of, but then I also remember things that I did as a youth that I'm proud of. Like I remember in like I think it was 10th or 11th grade, I did a book or a class presentation. We could do about any topic we wanted to. It was for like some stupid class, whatever, humanities or some shit. And I did it on why religion was the worst thing in the world. And that's a super like FU statement to almost everybody in the room because there's no one there that consider themselves like atheists at like. Right. 15 years old, you're like, well, I'm whatever my parents are, like,
yeah.
So I was really kind of ruffling feathers, but I have a mixed faith background, and I don't have super allegiance to any one actual church, and I believe what I believe spiritually, but that's me. Right. But any which way, I know what it's like to be a kind of a sheep, and I know what it's like to kind of be a bold, wolf too. So we have to be honest with ourselves, and we have to also be able to laugh at ourselves, I think.
We do, and I think the mixed identity thing is really interesting to me because, I'm of sort of mixed identity. My dad's from Iran. My mom, her parents were from Italy, but she grew up in Pasadena, Texas, and was sort of the all-American girl. And I grew up really not having a strong native identity of, this is my country and I'm going to be a jingoist about it. And I never thought, well, it's us versus them. I kind of just thought of myself as my own kind of deal, and I imagine it was the same with being mixed faith. You didn't have one homogenous identity that you felt like you were a part of. You felt more like you were an individual because you weren't thinking of your identity as a small cog in a collective, which I think is part of what leads people to being a libertarian or an anarchist too, is you think of yourself as an individual, which leads you to universalize that principle to others and realize that, hey, if I'm an individual, he's an individual, she's an individual, we're all individuals.
Right. Yeah, it's hard for some people to extrapolate, kind of higher level thoughts and bring them down to practical usage, but that's what we're doing, and that's when I found like the Feens and Bad Quaker and all these other shows of Free Talk Live, I was like, you know what, not that I just want to copy off of them and do what they're doing, but I think that's kind of one of my strengths is like I'm not afraid of being on stage or being a public setting or whatever. So if someone's going to talk to a camera or talk to a guest and interview, you don't want someone else to be nervous and like, oh my God, reading the notes, like, did you want to, like that's not going to go over too well. So I think maybe this is partially part of my gig, but we did have a kind of meat that goes on the bun of this show that we wanted to savor on a little bit, which was what's going on. And not that it's savory, it's actually it's a death sandwich with murder rolls and some horror sauce on top. Yeah, but we did want to talk a little bit about what's continuing to unfold now for, I think, you're going your 6,988 or something of Middle East violence. But your like you said, your lineage kind of goes back to Iraq, and from maybe just hearsay what's going on, but also I know you're following it pretty closely. So can you just kind of take the show for a second and tell our users what they, or users, I'm used to doing software work, tell our viewers what the hell is really going on as unbiased and informative as way as possible?
Sure. Well, I don't pretend to be unbiased. I'm biased towards liberty. I think states everywhere and militaries everywhere, collectives everywhere are always trampling on individuals and using them as cannon fodder, using them as bogeymen to whip up their own people into being cannon fodder. And my heritage is actually from Iran, not from Iraq. So I don't
Sorry
really.
about that, sir.
That's okay. It's very common. So it's kind of like I don't necessarily have a monkey in the circus, but I do see injustices so many places right now, and it's really horrible to I guess go to antiwar.com and just read the headlines. There's this game I used to play when I was in middle school called World War III, and you got to be the helm of a country, and it's kind of like Risk, but they were actual countries in modern times. And in between your turns, because it was turn-based, there would be headlines. And as things got more hectic, they would be worse and worse. And such invades such and such bombs such and such. And I'm looking at the antiwar.com headlines, and I feel like I'm in some kind of fiction, some kind of game, or some kind of movie, because everything's just happening so fast. The Gazans who live, as a lot of people know, in basically a prison. All the borders are shut down. They're not allowed to leave. These are Palestinian people. They're basically controlled completely and surrounded on all sides by Israel and Egypt, which people like to lump Egypt in as some Arab state that's attacking Israel, but really the Egyptian military is paid for by the American government. During the Camp David Accords, the U.S. government decided, hey, we'll pay both sides billions of dollars every year to keep them from fighting. And so they're bribed by U.S. foreign policy into basically squishing the Gazans in between themselves. And I think the death toll now is something like 800. 80% of them are civilians. 20% of them are children. And of course, even Rand Paul, which is so disappointing, is saying things like, well, Israel has a right to defend herself. And I tweeted back to Ambassador John Bolton the other day, which is one of the reasons I love Twitter, is I can actually tweet back to some of these idiots in power positions. He tweeted something like, Israel has the right to defend herself. And I said, well, in order for self-defense to be justified, it has to be proportionate to the threat and also relegated to the attacker, singled out to the attacker, right? I can't kill your neighbor because you're coming to kill me. And I can't kill you because you're giving me a dirty look. And so if Israel is pounding Gaza with American F-16s and bombs and tanks, and Gazans don't even have an army, an air force, or a navy, how is that really proportional? And if 80% of the dead are civilians, how is it attacking the attackers? It's not. And in Iraq, there really is no Iraq anymore. ISIS has sort of broken it down. They've broken down the berm between Syria and Iraq, which was a fake border since there was no natural border. They broke that down. It's funny because they're getting the benefits of U.S. funding in arms and Saudi funding in arms in Syria, and then somehow they're still demonized by the U.S. in Iraq, as if they're not the same group. And you can point back to Western intervention for both of these things. Both Israel and Iraq and Syria and much of the Middle East are lines drawn on a map by Western imperialists specifically to cut the lines across racial and ethnic and religious differences to make sure that they would never, those groups would never unify and provide a counterbalance to Western imperialist power. Kind of like gerrymandering. But of course, instead of losing a county seat, you can lose whole families, whole societies, whole cities, whole towns, whole nations now.
It's almost as if the rhetoric coming from the White House is that we are, as a nation, so to speak, promoting freedom and liberty and democracy around the globe, whereas in practice we are implementing violence and torture and propping up dictatorships and oligarchies. So if democracy were so liberating and so good for the world, and it were the answer, and I mean, isn't it weird that people aren't recognizing democracy, or are people recognizing it? And I'm just being harsh on society. Like, we're not really
Some
spreading democracy, you know?
some people do. Some people go to their favorite media personality or church personality and just take their talking points and go parrot them like a mynah bird. Some people try to think for themselves, and then some people mynah bird the people who are right. So either way, I think a lot of people are getting it. One of the important things, I guess not important, but it's a telling thing that there was a Palestinian American who was actually beat up before the current invasion of Gaza. He was beat up by some Israeli police. They didn't know he was a Palestinian American. They thought he was just a regular Palestinian. But because he was from New Jersey or some American East Coast city, it actually made the news. And CNN was showing it, and they were treating it like police beating up a minority, which was kind of mind-blowing. And so for a day or two at least, people kind of thought, maybe this guy was the victim. And I don't know. I guess the things are moving so fast, and the statists generally tend to have better PR and better positions and placement in media organizations than the non-statists. So they're always trying. That's their main job. I think it was Murray Rothbard who said the main job of the intellectual class is to justify the state. And they make that trade-off because otherwise they don't get a cushy job, and they don't get pensions, and they don't get tenured positions, and they don't get to reap all the benefits that they probably couldn't make in a free market. So to be a successful intellectual class that includes journalists, teachers, pundits, etc., you kind of have to take the state line, at least one state line, left, right, Palestinian, American, Israeli. And I guess my whole point is, can't we just look at all this and see that killing people is wrong no matter what your justification is? If it's not in self-defense, it's not justified.
Right. Right. I think it's hard, man. Part of the mission I think that we're facing right now in the world, or as a counterculture, so to speak, even if you're not a liberty person, if you're just a punk rocker or a hippie or something, you're just not going with the mainstream. Good for that, and good for you. Even if you're not going to say, "Oh, let me sign up for the libertarian movement, let me just be a voluntarist." Now, okay, you don't have to, but get that we're saying hitting and killing and harming people is bad, and voluntary agreements and mutual benefit is good. I mean, these are just common sense things. We don't hit to get what we want and stuff. But going back to the Iraq and Israel and Palestine and all this stuff going on, I mean, who are the players? I know it's Israel and Palestine, but you said Syria is kind of sort of pretending to be, or not pretending, the media is presenting Syria as, or no, Egypt rather, as a threat, as another possible threat to Israel.
Well, it's not all of the media. It's some of the media, and
Sure.
really, I'm referring to. There was this guy named Dennis Prager. I think he's a conservative talk show host. Scott Horton debunked him on his show on Monday. It was great. I actually made a video of it, so if people want to go to my YouTube channel, the Neema V, they can check it out. But in his he says, I'm going to explain the Middle East peace process. It's very simple. One side wants the other side dead. And so immediately off the bat, he's collectivist. He's saying everybody who's an Arab wants every Jew dead. And that's not the case. There are Jews who are not Zionists, who don't like what the Israeli state is doing. There are obviously Arabs are a very differing community with different sects, different nationalities, different types of people. So it's very collectivist from the get-go. And then in his map, he shows red Egypt, red Syria, red Jordan, and blue Israel. Like blue is the good guys, and look at all these evil red nations closing in on them. But what it fails to realize is that the king of Jordan, right, American democracy, no, in Jordan it's a king that America supports and that Israel supports, and he keeps his people in line so that they'll be at peace with Israel. Same thing in Egypt. The Egyptians hated the dictatorship. They hated Mubarak. They threw him out. It was the start of some new Arab Spring, right? But that's all been canceled now. The new leader of Egypt is Field Marshal Sisi, who's plucked straight out of the military ranks of Mubarak's old army. And he's following the same policies, the same deep state, the same emergency state they have where they whisk people off. And their main job, the reason they get so many billions of dollars from the United States, is so they can keep that border tight with Israel and respect whatever Israel does, even though the Egyptian people are sickened by all the death and suffering in places like
Excuse me, I'm sorry. No, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted you to expose a little bit, kind of just a high-level overview, bird's eye view of what people need to, for further research, where they can go and get a little more information. So do check out Neema's video. I did watch it. Not Neema's video. It's Scott Horton's video, but it is on Neema's channel. And I love Scott Horton, man. Just his like kind of punk rock, like fuck everything kind of like tone of voice.
Yeah, yeah. I dig the way he talks.
Like everything's so, and I'm not a sarcastic. Try to be a very positive person, like upbeat and yeah, like drink the Kool-Aid. But he's got this kind of like, yeah, well, this is no big fucking shock. The state's doing this again. Yeah, we saw that coming. Blah 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 blah. And like, it's good sometimes.
I love it when he talks about the police state too. Like, oh, a cop killed somebody because he felt like it, and that's the only thing he needs is to feel like killing somebody, and he gets away with it because it's true. It's so true, and he just breaks it down to this I guess lowest common denominator, but in a good way, because he's a good guy and he's on the good guy's side.
Definitely. I would love to keep going about the Middle East conflict, and maybe I'll put another guest out there. Maybe Neema could possibly think of someone that maybe isn't as hard to get as Scott Horton, but someone that might be in my realm, and I could do a whole show on that. But I had too much stuff to talk to you about outside of that, like deep, political conflict and stuff. So I want to do a little bit of time on drugs. Okay. Not on drugs. I mean, we don't have to do drugs to do this.
Okay.
We could just talk about drugs. But I'm gonna start out by telling the audience something about myself, which is a bit of a confession, but it's not. It shouldn't be. But I want to be vocal and I want to be honest. I'm a marijuana smoker, and I don't feel like that should be something that we should be ashamed to say if we are. No more so than if you're a cigarette smoker, or if you're someone who likes to have a casual drink at night, or if you really need your 2 cups of coffee in the morning, or you just have that box of Entenmann's donuts that magically disappears every Friday and magically reappears every Sunday. Mm-hmm. If you're any of those things, I don't feel any worse than that. I'm not saying that I go toke up and feel like bettering myself in so many ways, but all things considered, I make the trade-off and say this provides me with relaxation, creativity, a good, warm, happy feeling. I'm not a truck driver. I barely ever go anywhere. I live out in the middle of nowhere, and for me to enjoy a puff here and there, and where I am, it is illegal. So obviously, I don't do anything within the jurisdiction of legality, which would be wrong. Anything I do that might be viewed as illegal, I'm not doing within that jurisdiction. However you want to interpret that, physically, metaphysically, I don't care. I didn't do anything wrong within any jurisdictions to violate laws, nor would I recommend anybody do that. But I have a story to tell a little bit. I'm going to get into that real quick, and then I want to hear Neema's thoughts on war on drugs and kind of any questions you might have. Because what I did is I wanted to travel to a place where pot was legal. And it's very important that we make the distinction of it being legal as opposed to being decriminalized. And we'll get into that hopefully in a minute. But I went to Colorado to sample the recreational marijuana purchasing opportunity there in that state. Now, for those of you who don't know, marijuana was made recreationally available in Colorado legally starting in the beginning of January of this year. And from my research, the southern counties of the state don't currently offer any recreational marijuana purchases. So if you were to want to go to Colorado and sample this as an out-of-state person, which I did, which is perfectly fine, they take your ID and they accept you. You just can't take it over state lines, which, again, I don't recommend anybody breaking any laws. So there, to enjoy it in the state, there's a nice place in Moffat, Colorado, which is just about 30 miles north of Alamosa, and that is the southernmost place if you are coming from the south to get recreational marijuana in Colorado, and they are super friendly. They have a nice selection, and it was a really cool experience. Someone is telling me that I should refer to it as cannabis. I don't know if that's someone from the network. I will definitely try to use the word cannabis. So, Neema, what do you think about that, man? I know that you have been vocal about your cannabis use in the past. I don't know that you're still involved in that, but what's your thoughts on this stuff?
I'm completely sober now. I've been so for about 1.5 years. But that my sobriety is my choice. It has nothing to do with what I think anybody else should do. Just like your marijuana use is your choice, or cannabis use, or whatever you want to call it is your choice. Also, whatever you want to ingest is your choice. When me and Michael made the Guns and Weed Road to Freedom documentary, we had a clip that was me rapping about freedom of ingestion. And now I used to. I said I was an anarchist when we made guns and weed, and I was. But I used to really believe that the founding fathers, which I don't even believe in that phrase anymore, but at least some of them probably thought that if they could foresee the future and saw that drugs and marijuana would one day be criminalized and there'd be a war on the use of them, they would have wrote something into the Constitution like a freedom of ingestion amendment. Of course they didn't, and now that I look back at it, I'm not so sure they would have. Maybe Jefferson would have. I'm sure the other guys would have put the kibosh on it. So I think that that it should just be not in the realm of government thought at all. Well, I don't think there should be a government at all, but I don't think it's anybody else's business one way or the other.
Right. So even in a free market, you wouldn't voluntarily sign up for maybe like a what's the word I'm looking for? DRO that punish people for choosing to ingest certain substances, as long as they didn't make those people lunatics or something crazy like that.
No, but I might make the distinction that maybe I don't want my nanny to use it. So I might drug test my nanny. You know, I wouldn't see that as a problem in a free society because it's my kid and it's my home. But somebody who I'm working on a music collaboration with, maybe I'll require that they smoke marijuana.
Right.
I don't know.
I'm sorry, you sound way too sober to be written that bass line right now, so toke up, maybe do some peyote or something, and come back to me with like a real sick riff. Let me know what you get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a little clean, dude. I think you need to get a bit more dirty with it. Yeah.
Right.
You know, and that's the thing is it's become something that's so taboo that I really don't think it should be. It makes it hard in my mind to understand why, especially since, there are addiction problems, but the addiction problems, the drug use is really a symptom. I think when it comes to being an addiction problem, it's really it's a problem with that person. They're unwell, and they need to be treated, and they need to be helped, not victimized. Especially there's studies that show a large percent of people who are abused as children become addicts. You know, there's a strong correlation between negative childhood experiences and future drug addiction. So really, if you think about the war on drugs, in some sense, it's further abuse of people who've been abused before in their lives. And it's sad and it's tragic. And when I talk about the drug war, I don't like people to get the impression that I just think it'd be cool if people could do something fun every now and then. I really think that ending the drug war is ending a horrible crime against humanity that history will view as such. And, you know, on the level of slavery, I think history will view as the war on drugs as that kind of moral atrocity.
Yeah, I agree. We have an interesting comment. We have a few things in the chat I want to get to. We have an interesting comment in the chat from Kenji, who's a regular viewer and participator in Voluntary Virtues discussions on the network, and I thank him for that. He always takes a contrarian, I don't say always, but he tends to, in my mind, take a contrarian approach, or at least a different controversial approach. He says, as long as there is a state, we should not advocate an end to the drug war. I assume he might mean, and you can clarify in the text if you'd like, Kenji, but I assume he might mean that because he doesn't want us to push for any legislation, to really petition the state for anything. I'm hoping that's where he's coming from. If not, he can clarify that. I don't really. Do you see where he's coming from, Neema?
I can't honestly think of a reason. I can't think of one good thing or aspect, result of the drug war. I can't even think of a good motivation for the drug war.
Right.
Any of the arguments I've heard are on the order of, well, it's bad for people, it creates addicts, it ruins homes. But those are all results of A, either the addiction, or B, the actual black market economy created by the prohibition and the drug war in the first place.
Yeah. Another comment, interesting comment, we have Falls Apart 83, that it was a person that told me not to use the word marijuana and to call it cannabis. They clarified in the chat, it's not that I am incriminating myself by saying marijuana or something like that, or hurting the network. He just said that marijuana is a government word, and it just makes us sound kind of statist to say marijuana. So I agree with that.
Marijuana is the government name.
Weed, pot, flower, cannabis, sure. All those are better. He also pointed out that rand is a four-letter word, and I like that.
It is. Another four-letter word related to ganja, dabs. I hadn't heard about dabs.
Dabbing! I'd love to talk about dabbing.
That blew my mind. I actually came across it on Facebook, and so I did some wiki warrioring, and I don't know if I'm even up to that task at this age. If I was in college when dabs came out, I've been all over it. But
I'm 31. How old are you, Neema?
I'm 30. Have you dabbled in dabs?
My boy, I have dabbed it out. I will tell you, it's a world unto itself. I didn't expect to get into this, but this is cool. Listen, I'll go over it for the audience. If you've all understood marijuana or cannabis, or whatever you want to call it, there's smokable kind in a joint form. There's the bowl form where you light a bowl. There's the bong form where you have a glass tube with the water pipe in the bottom so you can cool the. There's a lot of ways to smoke marijuana. There's the vaporizers. There's a whole lot of ways to do it. So concentrates is this process where you basically what's called extract. You're extracting the cannabis or the crystals off of the bud into a concentrated form, which is like a wax or sometimes it comes like a butter form. And you take a little tiny dab, that's where they get the word dab, you take a little tiny dab on a dab needle, and you poke it up, and then, which is really cool, you set that down, and then you have your usually like a little dab rig, they call it. It's just like a bong or a water pipe, but on the bowl piece, it's usually a titanium nail or something really heavy duty like that, and you get a heavy duty blowtorch type thing, and you're torching this nail for about 20 or 30 seconds until it's red hot. And then you take your dab on your dab needle and you put it on there, and it just like turns into the steam right away and goes right in. And it's a different type of sensation of taking a big puff of weed smoke where you're like, oh, like you can't keep it in. This feels like I didn't get anything. And then you're like holding it in, and all of a sudden your head and everything, you're just like, oh my God. And then you blow it out, you just cough and cough and cough. And like the first 5 or 10 dabs I did, I literally, like the first 2 or 3, I could not actually make words. I could not speak for like 60 seconds. I was just like, go. Like people around me were just like, yep, that's what happens. Like not even like I'm acting like a baby. Like yeah, that's your first dab. That's how that goes. But I don't get to do it too often because it's a little bit more expensive than the regular way. But it's a treat.
I would imagine. Yeah, it seems almost like it is. If hash were dial-up, it'd be like the new Google Fiber. Gigabit internet or something.
Broadband trees, yeah.
Right. And I did try hash once when I was in high school, and it knocked me on my butt, and I don't know if I'd be into that now, because yeah,
cool.
it kind of blew your mind. And near the end there, I like to just be a little bit more relaxed with it and take a toke or two and then work on something. So I feel like with dabs, you'd probably be out of commission for a good couple hours.
Sort of, but the cool thing about dabs too is if you have the little concentrate pens that people use for like hookah, tobacco, and stuff.
Now too, right?
Yeah, if you get the right kind of consistency, you just drop it in there, and it kind of is like a slow burn, and you could just take a little tiny. But yeah, I mean, to each their own, like you said. I didn't want to. We pretty much had 10 minutes to talk about war and drugs. So anyway, yeah, we pretty much covered that. We got a few minutes left. I want to thank everybody in the chat. We actually have a couple more things I'll just fire at you from the chat.
Okay.
Let's see. Kenji wants to know what's our opinion on Ron Paul now. I just want to hear your opinion. Go ahead.
I thought it was going to be great when he retired from Congress and sort of became a teacher. I think it was a mistake to put his content behind a paywall. I still think he's great. I think the Ron Paul Institute for Peace is great, and Daniel McAdams there. I think he's doing good work. I was saddened. I think somebody tried to press him on whether he was an anarchist or not. I think it was Tom Woods, and Ron Paul said something to the effect of, well, he still thinks there should be police. So kind of disappointed, but then again, the guy's in his 70s, and he's done more to advance liberty than in the mainstream than anybody I can think of. So I think he's a legend.
All right, cool. I would kind of concur with that. Pretty much everything you said, I'd co-sign most of that. We have a comment from Render, W-R-E-N-D-E-R, Render in the chat. He had a lot of nice things to say about you, Neema. He said he's so happy to see and hear you again, that Freedom Feens is not the same without you. And I would agree, it's not the same, but it is equally great, just in a different way. No knock to what Michael's doing over there. He's doing an awesome job.
Yeah.
And he, Render also said you were one of the best voices for the liberty movement, in his opinion. So some kind things there.
Thank you.
We have a minute left. I'm going to sign off pretty much. Thank you, Neema, so much for coming on today, man. It was one of the biggest honors I've got to have so far in my quest to wake people up for liberty. I hope an adequate amount of people see this and hear what you had to say and hear what we had to discuss. And maybe one day you'll be able to come back again. That would be awesome for me and our audience. And I think I'm forgetting something, but say goodbye to the audience, man. Final words, final thoughts.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure and my honor. It was great getting to be in front of a microphone again. Thanks for the questions from the audience. Thanks for the chat room. And thank you, Randall. I love your show name. I think this is a neat little podcasting 2.0 kind of a setup, and I really dig it. Thank you.
Cool, man. Thank you so much for coming on. We have Liberty Geek with Chuck Ford coming up next at the 9 o'clock Eastern time slot, for those of you who base your scheduling on that. And stay tuned, man. Stay tuned to Voluntary Virtues. Tune back next week, 8 p.m. Eastern time, for more Roads to Liberty and more good times, good guests. Thanks, Neema. See you soon, brother.
Peace.
Peace. Arms.